That's my mom, Natalie Antonetti. Beautiful, vibrant, excited to be alive. She was an amazing mom. She always tried to have a good time with everything. My mom was a young mom. She was into, rock and roll. Music was always playing.
By all accounts, just one of those people that you meet and you never forget.
Jumped down the stairs and there she was, just covered in blood. Her head was bleeding pretty bad. It was absolutely awful. Who did this? Who could have done this? That was also really scary, Like, who would have had this out for this wonderful woman that never, really did anything to anyone? Well, it's 25 years ago, and it's like the one thing I've tried to get out of my memory, and I can't.
We had no DNA, no fingerprints, really no physical evidence of any kind. This was a cold case.
I never thought that it would be solved. I thought it was just over.
The initial phone call was anonymous.
An angry wife called the police to tell on her husband. It just blew the case wide.
This is the Austin police. My friend is sitting here in a puddle of blood. Ma'am, listen to me. Calm down, okay? We're going to help your friend out.
I'd never forget. It was really, really a horrible scene.
In 1985, Johnny Gowdy was just 16. Before dawn that October morning, he heard something, rolled out of bed, and stumbled down the stairs. It was his mom, Natalie Antonetti.
I was incoherent, kind of in shock, and completely, just covered in blood. Her head was bleeding pretty bad. And I tried to ask her what had happened. She knew who did this to her, and she couldn't talk. She just had a really, really frightened look in her eyes. And it's hard to see your mom in that situation.
I've been trying to imagine what it's like to see her covered in blood and try to talk to her, and she can't tell you what happened.
You could see in her eyes that she was scared. When the ambulance got there, they kind of took over and, put her in the gurney and stuff, and then I rode to the hospital with her. Before she went in, I asked her to give me a kiss, and she was able to do that.
Did you have any idea that you were kissing her goodbye?
No.
Natalie's murder would haunt Johnny Gowdy for over 20 years. To start unraveling this mystery, we began on 6th Street, the heart of Austin's music scene.
Mom was like, hey, I just, made some cookies. You want to get them? You'd be like, I'll be there in a minute. And she'd sing back, well, if you want it, here it is, come and get, everything was a song, So
that's great.
It was very much like that growing up.
But the song ended suddenly for Johnny and for Natalie. After 2 weeks in a coma, Natalie died. It was a shocker for everyone in the tight-knit Austin music scene, and a confusing case for police.
See this building right up here?
Right here?
Mm-hmm. That was Natalie's apartment.
Austin police detective Tom Walsh picked up Natalie's homicide on the Cold Case Squad in 2007.
How do you imagine that he would have done this?
I think it was very quick. It was in and out.
Police think Natalie was bashed in the head with a baseball bat over and over again. A crime so violent, Natalie's bloody handprints were left all over the house.
Here's the downstairs porch and the upstairs porch of Natalie's apartment.
At the time, there was a witness who reported seeing a shadowy figure nearby.
He saw a man holding a club or a small baseball bat.
a baseball bat.
Yes.
The witness described a man, 5'10" or 5'11", with sandy hair. Police focused on a restaurant manager and sometime male stripper named Marty Odom. With blonde hair and a sturdy build, he seemed to match the witness description. And shortly after Natalie's murder, he was arrested for another very serious crime.
He raped a woman in North Austin, and then investigators found out that he lived in the apartment complex that Natalie lived in.
Odom had a track record of violence. He was known to keep a baseball bat around. His ex-wife said he was abusive and sexually violent. And his roommate claimed he bragged that he once slept with Natalie. Police questioned Odom, even gave him a lie detector test, which he reportedly failed. But he always denied killing Natalie. Police didn't have enough evidence, so he was never charged with her murder. But he was convicted for the unrelated rape and sent to prison.
In 2006, there was a tip called in. This woman said that her husband made a statement that he had sinned against God and sinned against man.
When they told me about the rapist, I thought it was the rapist because I was 17 and I wanted to know who's killed my mom. So I was like, okay, well then, cops say it, it's, that's who it is. You kind of have to trust in the police. And so I did. I believed that that was the guy.
But Johnny was never fully satisfied. Police had arrested Marty Odom for the unrelated rape, and he went to prison for that crime. But it wasn't enough. No one was officially accused or punished for Natalie's murder. And that began to eat at Johnny.
I was on tour. My phone rang from a number I didn't know, and I answered it. This guy said, "Hi, my name is Detective Tom Walsh from the Austin Police Department. Don't worry, you're not in trouble."
Detective Walsh had news.
I was like, wow. They're reopening my mom's case, and this guy that's got it is amazing.
What do you like about being a cop?
When I became a detective, I loved being in the hunt.
What is it about a mystery that you like?
Solving it.
And thanks to that phone call, Walsh felt he was on a fast track to solving this one.
He was like, I know who did this.
The suspect was a man named Dennis Davis.
I did know Dennis very well. He was a friend of mine.
Dennis Davis was a well-known name in the Austin music scene, a studio owner and engineer who later moved to Nashville to work with big stars like Tim McGraw and Faith Hill.
How did he come across to you? Was he a player, a ladies' man?
No.
No, not at all.
I didn't see him that way. I saw him just really quiet and reserved.
I never thought of him as someone that had the capacity really to hurt another person.
Johnny knew Dennis too, because Dennis had dated his mom. And he was good to Johnny.
He just had this amazing studio. He had like the best studio in town. And I was like the only 16-year-old kid that could go by there anytime. I thought he was a nice guy.
Dennis Davis was not an obvious suspect. For one thing, he had what sounded like a solid alibi. He said he was with a girlfriend at his house on the night of the murder.
Dennis told police he got a phone call from a friend and rushed to the crime scene just in time to see Natalie being loaded into an ambulance. 17 years after Natalie's murder, it was Dennis Davis's wife who made that call to police. Becky Davis had a feeling for years that her husband may have murdered Natalie, but never said anything until now.
She was in therapy because her and her husband were going through a divorce, and the therapist said, "You need to call the police."
It was a tantalizing lead, but not nearly enough to make an arrest. So Walsh hit the road. and tracked down this woman, Amparo Garcia Crow, who was Dennis Davis's alibi.
Come on in. Thank you. You come bearing journals, my goodness.
Yes.
Amparo Garcia Crow is a writer and performer.
Here, let me help you.
At the time, the cops never questioned her, but if they had, she would have told them there's no way she was with Dennis that night, and she can prove it.
These are all your journals?
Not all of them. That's just one box of probably about 4 years, and I've had them for 30 years.
Because she's kept detailed journals since the late 70s.
At this time in my life, I was writing every day. I kind of really wanted to get in a way, a psychological picture of myself. Because the mind likes to change things if you don't, you know.
It's clear from her journals Amparo knew both Dennis and Natalie.
Dennis had a party recently, and I met the woman that he's seen, who was Natalie.
Who was Natalie?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, around the time of Natalie's murder, Amparo had also been dating Dennis Davis.
Yeah, there was kind of a shyness to him.
But Amparo says, according to her journal, she ended up dating Dennis for only about 3 weeks before going back to an old boyfriend named Hal.
I had gone back to Hal, and that's what I'm writing here. We're kind of in a honeymoon stage.
That was the week before Natalie was killed.
You stopped dating Dennis the Thursday?
It's that Thursday before the assault.
Dennis had told police he and Amparo had been in bed together when the dramatic phone call came, telling him that Natalie had been assaulted. But there's no mention of any of this in Amparo's diary.
You know, I'm a writer, I'm a dramatist. I know if I'm impacted by something, I log it.
It would be in here,
right,
if you were with Dennis that night.
Absolutely. I'd be working it out. It would be so shocking. If a phone call had come in the middle of the night, I would remember that phone call and being woken up at his house in the middle of the night. That never happened.
It wasn't exactly a smoking gun, but if Amparo's story is true, then Dennis is lying, and his alibi is worthless. Detective Walsh was energized by this new information, and it opened new doors. Walsh discovered another woman who revealed a very different side of the supposedly mild-mannered Dennis Davis.
The first sign was he would just get beat red. His eyes would bulge out. That's when you knew, time to go.
We're all into the music scene. What was that like?
Oh, there was just so many, you know, people that were up and coming, and everybody would go to so many clubs here and watch them play and then watch them grow.
Linda Bless moved to Austin in 1984. She worked on tours with major rock acts, and Linda would turn out to be a key witness in the investigation into her friend, Dennis Davis.
There were two different sides of Dennis. One was the very sweet, caring side. The other side, you didn't know when it was going to come out.
Linda says she saw glimpses of this darker side, a Dennis Davis who was jealous, angry, even violent.
It was almost like a screaming inside, you know, like, ugh.
What would set him off?
It always seemed to pertain to women.
His previous best friend told me one time that the only time that he ever saw Dennis get angry was when another man would be paying attention to a woman that he was with, and the rage would come.
In 2008, Detective Walsh went looking for Dennis to question him about Natalie's murder, and he found him in a jail cell in Pennsylvania, serving 2 months on a DUI.
It's like I didn't come into my own.
The interview starts out friendly.
You were like the king. Yeah, it's good to be the king.
Looks like he's your pal.
Yeah, he was my pal.
But not for long. Walsh wants to tie Dennis to Natalie's murder and the likely murder weapon, a baseball bat.
Did you have a small bat?
Dennis says he never had a baseball bat.
He never had one. He had not just one, but he had a couple of them.
In fact, Linda says, one night at a party at Dennis's house,
all of a sudden Dennis showed up in the doorway with this bat in his hand.
Linda says Dennis was heading for his girlfriend.
I just got up and pushed him into the bedroom, or, you know, had him go into the bedroom and put the bat down and, come on, let's go outside.
And Walsh found tangible evidence of this angry side.
Do you think you were jealous? I think I was starting to get a little bit.
This is about the note.
Sitting in the case file, a note left for Natalie from a jealous Dennis about her new boyfriend.
Natalie, you can go to hell. Take that with you. If you don't have the brains and self-respect to see through his then you, DD.
The case against Dennis is getting stronger. The broken alibi, the baseball bat, the angry note. Next,
Had been in a rage and was crying, and he was laying down in the fetal position, and he told her that he had killed or he had murdered Natalie, were the words that she said he used.
He confessed to her.
He confessed to her.
and that was enough. In 2009, 24 years after Natalie Antonetti's murder, Austin police arrested Dennis Davis. Johnny had never imagined that Dennis was capable of killing his.
I know that. You were not
He would never out and out say that he murdered Natalie. Towards the end of the whole interrogation, I said to him, "What do you think?" And he said, "You think I did it."
What was your reaction when you were told that he was going to be arrested for your mom's murder?
Everything made sense. All the weird, cryptic questions that Tom Walsh was calling me every once in a while. I said, "Do you remember Chevy Malibu?" Like, no. "Do you remember this? Like, do you remember this guy saying this?" Like, nope. And it all made sense.
And Johnny suddenly looked at Dennis in a new light.
He was a bad, jealous, violent guy.
Dennis Davis says he didn't murder Natalie and can't believe that Johnny thinks he did.
Johnny should know better. He knew me. You know, I didn't do this horrible crime.
The investigator wants to solve this case. Everybody wants to be a hero.
The problem is, Wade says, there just isn't enough evidence against Dennis to convict. His client, he says, is an innocent man.
The detective in this case knew that the neighbor identified someone who didn't look like Dennis Davis.
And that neighbor is the only eyewitness, the man who called minutes after Natalie's attack to report a prowler carrying a baseball bat.
This neighbor identified a person, a tall, blonde man. My client's about 5'6", 5'7", slight build, curly, dark hair. He is not the person the neighbor identified.
So if Dennis Davis didn't kill Natalie, who did?
I think it's very possible that Marty Odom committed the offense.
That's Marty Odom, the rapist, who was living near Natalie at the time of her murder. The man cops once thought was their best suspect.
He claimed to know the victim in this case, and we also know he's very violent. He was violent with his girlfriend, he was violent with his ex-wife. He took a polygraph, and he flunked the polygraph. The polygraph operator said, "I'm 100% sure he committed the offense."
The guy who ran the lie detector test said he was 100% sure that Marty Odom killed Natalie?
Yes.
I'm innocent. I didn't do it.
Dennis Davis, the man in hot water for this once cold case, in his only TV interview.
Through your eyes, who was Natalie Antonetti?
She was a very vivacious, lively, energetic young woman. When she answered the phone, she went, "Hello," just like that.
Dennis told us he truly cared for Natalie, and that's why he wrote that angry note about her new boyfriend, a musician.
One of my pet peeves in this world is when I see young women get involved with musicians who just drag them down.
In the note, Dennis told Natalie to go to hell.
That was a pretty angry note.
Yes, it was.
Doesn't it sound like the guy that wrote that note would be capable of harming Natalie, the guy who's angry?
Getting mad, writing a note is a far cry from killing somebody. You wrote a nasty note, oh, you're capable of murder. Everything gets blown out of proportion.
But how does he answer Galinda's story about his confession?
She exaggerated.
So what's the real story?
I told her some things. I said, it's my fault that Natalie died. If I hadn't upset her that night, that day, she'd still be alive today.
The night she was attacked, Natalie went out for a short walk by the pool near her apartment.
I think someone spotted her or followed her, or she ran into someone out the pool, and then they came back later.
And then killed her?
Yeah.
Did you ever hurt Natalie?
No, never.
Did you kill Natalie?
No, I did not. I'm absolutely sure. I wouldn't do something like that.
You have a victim who has no defensive wounds. It's not a burglar. It's not a rapist. Somebody who's exceptionally angry at her. There's one candidate for that, Dennis Davis.
Austin Assistant District Attorney Mark Pryor.
This is the first case I've ever lost sleep over.
This was a very tough case.
Mark Pryor's co-counsel, Efren De La Fuente.
Being a cold case, a 1985 case, and here you are trying it in the year 2011.
The prosecution's case wasn't just cold. It was almost entirely circumstantial.
Yeah, I just wake up at night and I'd wonder about, could we do this? Could we bring Johnny justice?
When I went in and met with Efren De La Fuentes and with Mark Pryor, they never said, don't get your hopes up. I think Efren said, I don't know, Johnny, brother, this is gonna be tough.
April 2011, Natalie Antonetti's brutal and unexplained murder, unsolved for 26 years, is finally going to trial.
The evidence is going to show that this man, Dennis Davis, split her skull as she lay on the couch in her apartment. The evidence is going to show that this man, Dennis Davis, left a trail of breadcrumbs, small mistakes that eventually, after 2 decades, led the police to his door.
The prosecution's case may be circumstantial, but they do have that phone call that started it all.
The statement that the defendant had made was that he had sinned against God and man. The woman who made that call was Rebecca Davis, the defendant's wife.
And they have Amparo, who denies being with Dennis on the night of the murder. Linda Bless, who remembers him carrying a baseball bat. And Galinda, his ex-girlfriend, who says he confessed to murder.
He told her. He flat out told her, I killed her. I killed Natalie Antonetti.
Attorney Wade Russell reminds the jury there was no physical evidence against Dennis at all.
You're not going to hear any DNA evidence. You're not going to find any hair samples. You are not going to hear from any eyewitnesses that saw Dennis Davis at the crime scene.
Dennis would choose not to take the stand.
And there is not proof beyond reasonable doubt, and everyone knows that as you sit here.
This case would be all about truth and lies.
Did you have a small bat?
He lied in the interview. He didn't have a bat. Says it twice. His ex-girlfriend was beaten to death with a bat. He owned a bat. He knew he had one. He just lied.
This is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. It's reasonable doubt after reasonable doubt.
The defendant, please rise. We, the jury, find the defendant, Dennis Davis, guilty of the offense of murder as alleged in the indictment signed by the foreperson.
Guilty of Natalie Antonetti's murder. It was 26 years since Natalie was killed, but it was not too late for Johnny.
I was so grateful. I mean, I was overcome. And it was hard to hold in. My aunts and I were squeezing each other's hands so hard, it was unbelievable.